how can we be more effective with our assessment, essentially to be more efficient, right? So you don't want to be administering a final exam that you have to grade that actually isn't tied to your goals and objectives. That essentially is a waste of time because you're not measuring any of the learning that's taken place. So the intentional development at the beginning of your course will save you time at the end of your course. So when we think about effective assessment, we go back to Bloom's taxonomy. This is your familiar pyramid that you will probably dream about at night if you aren't already. But this idea that effective assessment is always aligned with your learning goals. You know, I remember when I was in college, and sometimes I would have final exams where the instructor asked me questions that had not been covered in the course. How frustrating. It was so frustrating. And it begged the question, what are they assessing and evaluating me on? So having it tied to objectives is really essential. So if you think about your levels and orders of thinking, sometimes you're back to this idea where you're just measuring kind of basic knowledge. And so here, if your course objective is about explaining, which is a lower level thinking category, then your assessment should be aligned with that. Similarly, if you're learning, your course objective is more at a higher level thinking, it should really be rigorous, right? So you should have something where they have to demonstrate how they're creating, how they're predicting. And so thinking about that alignment is really critical. Effective assessment is also authentic. And when we think about authentic, we can think about it as in comparison to traditional assessment. So this is kind of a new way of thinking about assessment that forces us from rote memorization and just regurgitation of information to really intentional thinking. So if we think about traditional assessment, oftentimes these are things that we've been exposed to in our own training, right? It's where there are traditional written tests, there are proxy measures for learning, that we're asked to say exactly what our instructor told to us, repeating facts from a lecture or a reading, you know, midterms that only tell us what is known at the time of the test, competitive ranking systems, prioritization of one final exam and no formative assessment. So that's fairly characteristic of this kind of traditional assessment approach. As opposed to an authentic approach, which we're really promoting here, and that's thinking about how your learners are truly integrating and demonstrating knowledge. So thinking about assessment that includes observation, that includes expectations for measuring skills, multiple approaches to assessing your learners. So not just thinking about multiple choice, but thinking about presentations, thinking about discussion boards, thinking about things that really encourage different ways to assess your learners. And promoting this like how knowledge. So going beyond kind of the facts to thinking about why, how, and providing feedback to student that really observes those changes in their own knowledge and performance from the start of the course to the end. So thinking about ways that authentic assessment really helps us as instructors develop assignments which are more rigorous, more intentional, seeking to connect with students' real competencies and proficiencies that they've developed, that they're more meaningful to students. So it's not that a student gets an 85 on a final exam, but they don't really know what to do with that, right? But if you're giving them feedback in ways that they say, oh, I missed this question, or I'm not grasping this concept, they're actually able to focus on that deficit, enhance it so they're growing as a learner. So when we think about effective assessment, it's also transparent, meaning that those learners know how they'll be assessed and according to what criteria. So it does not mean giving students the answer, but it does mean, and it doesn't mean making assignments easy. What it means is giving students a roadmap by which they know what they're supposed to learn, and each of the assessment steps along the way help them know if they're mastering those concepts. So when you have transparent assessment, it does mean articulating the knowledge and skills that students are expected to learn. So I was just teaching in a workshop with some colleagues in Liberia, some faculty members in the School of Medicine there. And they said, oh, you know, we're hesitant to give students like the criteria that we're evaluating them on because that'll be easy. Then they're going to know what's on the final exam. We're going to give them the answers. But no, you're actually just telling them what you expect for them to learn. So giving them that roadmap helps them to meet your expectations, but it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't mean you're giving them the answers to the exams. It means that you're helping them define the outcomes in advance. They're able then to, when you share and review criteria, they also are able to assess their own work vis-a-vis your expectations. And you can align your outcomes with the course assignments. So it's transparent, it's clear from the very beginning. It's also actionable. So by this, we mean useful for students in the learning process. So as Elizabeth mentioned, time management is pretty critical for this. It's providing assessment and feedback in a timely way. If you give an assessment, you should be able, you should have set aside time so that you can give back feedback quickly. So when I presented my module 3 presentation, Dr. Bond sent me feedback an hour after the presentation, maybe not even an hour. And that was so helpful for me in understanding where I succeeded and where I had opportunities to improve. So timely feedback is really actionable because you're in the moment and you understand. It's understandable as well. So when we think about actionable, we think about clear and specific ways that you can improve. So not just great job or it needs more work, but specific recommendations on how to understand how to make your deliverables, your presentations, whatever it is, more useful to you. And then lastly, it's applicable. So learners, whoever your learners are, at whatever stage of development, we're all learners, is that they can take that information they receive from assessments to improve their own learning and their own outputs. So let me stop for a moment and ask you all these 5 objectives that I've just identified. Do you remember them? You can drop it in the chat or unmute, tell me a few of them, but I'm curious to see what you have retained from even those 5 kind of effective strategies. I see a chat, so let me open it up. Great, timely, actionable, fantastic. There are 3 others. Authentic, applicable. Oh my goodness, you all, I'm assessing you right now and you're doing a fantastic job. Although actually that wouldn't be effective assessment because I need to give you more specific. All right, great. So fantastic. So when we think about effective assessment, we can really be guided by these 5 objectives. So aligned with learning objectives. Fantastic, Dr. Zemene. Robust. right? And thinking about how it can be stronger. Authentic, transparent, actionable, excellent. And then some other ones that we can think about. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it can give us a sense of and be guiding the development of our assessment tools. So excellent. Let me get a time